Welcome to Melanin Combos, where we hold space for real stories, sacred healing, and deep connection.
One faith, two voices, unpacking healing, culture, and everything in between. Let's talk.
Welcome to Melanin Combos. Today we are doing a bonus. We're doing a bonus episode. At the time of this recording, we just finished watching Mara Brock Akil's adaptation of Forever on Netflix. So we wanted to share our thoughts and put it out there in the podcast world for you to join this conversation with us. By the time you hear this podcast, it'll probably be like a month and a bit after the show has come out. So yeah, let's dive into this conversation. So, like I mentioned, this is Mara Brock Akil's adaptation of Judy Blume's book Forever. And I will say, like, I'm not actually familiar with the book. I didn't read Judy Blume when I was in school. Like, I'm familiar with who she is because I saw her novels, but I was more so caught up in like Chicken Noodle Soup and Babysitter Club books. So I didn't actually ever read any of her books. But I think it's beautiful that they were able to like reimagine her book with her blessing. And of course, Mara does amazing, phenomenal work with all the shows that she does. So I wasn't expecting anything less. Was this your first time encountering Forever? Have you ever read Judy Blume? Do you know anything about the books?
I
No?
know nothing about Judy Blume. This is my first time hearing about her.
About her?
I think as
All
before
right.
we started recording, you mentioned the aspect of you said chicken noodle soup, but that was Babysitter Club,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Like I think like
yeah.
those are the books that like were just popping around like when I
Oh,
was
okay,
like in grade six, grade seven. Like so either
gotcha.
you read Judy Blume or you read Chicken Little Soup, but I just didn't gravitate to her
Oh,
books.
okay.
My sister
Yeah,
read them,
no.
but not
Yeah,
me.
my sister read those books, but I never got into those. Never didn't
I
know who she
mean,
was. So yeah,
it's fair.
so
So
yeah.
we've watched the whole 8 episodes of Forever, and some of my initial thoughts when I watched the first episode was like, this is a beautiful black family. Um, this is a beautiful black family. They
Mm-hmm.
are striving. Like, look at where they live. I thought it was beautiful to see a black family like successful and there
Mm-hmm.
not being any like trauma. There was no violence. There was no um like there was no trauma. There was no like
Mm-hmm.
trauma happening in the show. And I thought it was beautiful to also see that there's these two kids who come from like these two different worlds, seeing the
Mm-hmm.
socioeconomic difference and that they could still coexist. I absolutely love the relationship between Chloe and Keisha. I thought
Mm-hmm.
that like beautiful relationship. I love that. I loved the themes of like sex and sexuality like came up in the show, and of course the theme of um post-secondary school and going to PWIs, and just the way that they talked about identity and just
Mm-hmm.
like getting to know and feel out yourself, and that's what you're doing in those years, and I thought it was done beautifully. What were your initial thoughts about the show?
Yeah, definitely. I guess like backstory. Like for me, when it comes to like Netflix, I kind of always just look out for new shows, movies added
Hmm.
to my list or whatever. So I had clocked this show from a couple weeks before it was releasing, but never paid attention to when it released until you had like
Yeah,
I guess you had watched it and then you text me
I was like,
and
yeah, you need to watch this
yeah,
show.
the whole nines. And even then I still wasn't like I'd be like, yeah, I'll watch it when I get to it or whatever. But yeah, then I watched the first episode and
And
was
then you were
very,
hooked.
yeah, I was very intrigued and got hooked on it. Um, with everything that you said, I think for me it would just be the aspect. I really appreciated the relationship between Eric and Justin. That was a relationship that I enjoyed seeing
Me
kind of just
too.
blossom or bloom um, as the storylines unfolded
Yeah.
between the both of them. So that was great to see. I think for me there was just um, more things that just came up for me in terms of I guess maybe I guess professionally, in terms of just like
Oh.
Justin just being like a neurodivergent um kid and or teenager, and just how his parents handled him or supported
Mm-hmm.
him, like just what that looked like for him, and just how
What
that
came
looked
up
like.
for you?
I think for me, just like feeling feeling like his parents didn't support sometimes the way that he needed, and I guess that did show up in this show predominantly with between Justin and his mom. But I think the other aspect was his first interaction like with Keisha's dad, and
Uh,
I think that was a moment where I felt really like cringe and
mm-hmm.
uncomfortable in that moment because I felt his embarrassment, so to say. So that was something to, yeah, something I just felt. But I think like overall, I really enjoyed um, just the experience. It was just refreshing. It was just like a breath
Mm-hmm.
of fresh air to watch that show. And as you said, like there's no trauma, there's
No violence.
no
No
violence,
getting shot.
yeah, no one gets shot, no real like drug use or
Yeah. No one
anything,
jail.
yeah, no police. I think outside like one episode,
There was
there's no
no like,
police
yeah.
involvement or anything like that. And I think it just really she did a good job at just speaking to the black experience from both ends and tried to cover um as much as she possibly could. So you
Mm-hmm.
saw everything from like discovering yourself, sexuality, black black boys in the police, navigating, being a parent with a neurodivergent son, and
Right.
relationship dynamics, and blended families or not typical nuclear family settings, and just all those different themes that just came up. I just really appreciate how all of them just
Mm-hmm.
blended together and coexisted together, which I think just speaks to the overall lived experience of any human being, that like we experience numerous of things at the same time and have to in some way have bandwidth, emotional bandwidth, to support ourselves essentially as we navigate.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. There's about like, and as you were talking, I'm like, oh, we should talk about that. We should talk about that. But it's okay. We'll reel it in. There's like about three or four like takes that we wanted to share with you guys today. I'm gonna just list them down quickly, and then we'll jump in. So one of the first things that we wanted to talk about was the scene where Keisha is explaining to her mom what happened with the sex tape. So there's that scene. There's the scene where Justin goes to the Northwestern event with his mom, and she's talking to her old professor about him. So she's introducing him. And Justin is trying to talk, but his mom is talking over him. And then you see like how he just like fades in the background. And I feel like that's like just a theme throughout the whole show about his position in life, and like just coming of age and like learning to take up space and own like who you are. I think that's like a theme. So we'll talk about that. I want to talk about the sex scenes. So I seen online that a lot of people were like not really happy about the sex scenes. People were complaining that was inappropriate. There's too many sex scenes, that for the fact that it was a teen show, that the amount of sex scenes was just too much. It was like raunchy, whatever. So we'll talk about that. And I also wanted to talk about um in addition to the sex scenes, just like how Keisha like was not hypersexualized throughout the whole show. Like I like that really blessed my heart. And the fact that Christian felt it necessary to, I think it's interesting that Christian leaked well, he didn't leak the tape, but he showed the tape to his basketball teammates as a means of one upping. Because, like, if you remember the conversation about, um, they're having a conversation, and one of his teammates say that black girls don't give head like white girls, whatever. And he's like, nah, that's not true. And then he shows them the tape. So, like, it's like, how come you were so willing to show them the tape at the expense of Keisha so that you could one up your white teammate? Like, what is this align trying to align yourself, or like what was that? And I think that's like such a trend or a theme of white woman, a black woman, wow, not being protected by black men, in an attempt or a pursuit of success or like appealing to their white
Mm-hmm.
counterparts. I think like that's something to talk about. And of course, the whole conversation, like that, the whole theme of the whole podcast about like, okay, take your time. Just to cut that. Yeah, and so Christian doing that, and just like that whole theme of him wanting to be seen as like either on par or trying to achieve
Mm-hmm.
success like his white counterparts. So, okay, let's jump right into this. Where do you want to start? Let's start with um let's start with the first thing, like Keisha telling her mom about the sex tape. So I said it like it actually hurt me. Like I was really hurt, especially because up until this point, like we've gotten a lot of context as to why she hasn't told her mom, what her mom thinks actually happened, and like her having to hold all of that and her
Mm-hmm.
navigating a lot of situations, trying to run from this experience by herself. Like she didn't even
Mm-hmm.
tell her play cousins or her aunties. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like she's really just navigating this all by herself and then having to create distance between her and Christian and not really being able to explain why. So like that hurt me, and then to see that her mom made a lot of it about her. So I don't know if you remember, like she says that,
Mm-hmm.
oh, how Keisha had her at that school, cussing off the people, telling them that they're racist, whatever, when in fact this was really what's happening and how everybody else knows what happened except for her. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
then her talking about like how like now like she has to pay, like so the mom is paying fees for her to go to this other school, and it's like a strain on her, and like
Mm-hmm.
her realizing like this is because of a sex tape, like you are causing me this stress because of a sex tape, where when she was going to the other school she was on a scholarship, so it was like a
Yeah.
free ride. So like it hurt me that her mom made the situation about her and then walked out on her. Like my heart, like
Mm-hmm.
that really hurt me, and I don't know, like it made me very sad for Keisha, but it also made me sad for her mom that she wasn't able to see past the fact that her daughter held that by herself. And obviously it wasn't intentional. Like
Mm-hmm.
she didn't like intentionally make this tape to be passed around. So there's
Right.
obviously shame and hurt that's coming with her finding out that this was shared, and her hiding it, and her having to
Mm-hmm.
leave her school and people knowing this stuff about her. But like instead of me holding space to comfort her daughter,
Mm-hmm.
like it became about her and like
Right.
what this meant for her. So that really hurt me. Yeah, and I felt bad for Keisha. I felt that it was unfortunate that that was an opportunity for the mom to lean in,
Mm-hmm.
and it was missed. I think, was it redeemed?
A
Kinda
little bit.
ish,
Yeah.
a little bit. There was a little bit of repair later when the mom is like she wants to press charges.
Yeah, no, I think there was
Yeah.
repair. I do think there was, because there was that scene of like mom wanting to press charges, but then there was also the scene where she comes to her cousin's house where Keisha's staying, and they have that conversation, and she talks about going to therapy essentially, and just having that conversation. So I do think repair did take place, and I think you can see
Mhm.
that even in the remainder of the show, where Keisha's just offered that tons of support, and everyone is
I can't hear you.
oh, you can't hear me.
Now I can.
Oh, sorry. um yeah, so there is that aspect. um so yeah, I agree with with what came up for you. I think for me, during all of that, or that particular scene, was just the aspect of safety. And so I think for me, what I was picking up on is just how much protecting that image or protecting um, that yeah, protecting that image that Keisha believed her mom had of her, and
Hmm.
how important it was to protect that at all costs. So I think that just
Right.
influenced a lot of her decision making in terms of, yeah, I can't tell my mom I need to uphold this story, I need to uphold this narrative, even though it causes me pain, discomfort,
Yeah.
even though it um, in in some regards kind of just blew up my life in large parts, and having me to experience all this transition. I think there was just this aspect of like, I me maintaining this narrative, me maintaining this story provides some sort of normalcy or and safety for myself in
Right.
terms of the image that my mom, in terms of like Keisha and Shelly, has towards her. So there was that aspect, and I think even to your point of your um, I guess hurt or disappointment. I think one of the things that I was picking up on is just the aspect of like, we expect people to have skills just because of your lived experience. We associate that there should be certain skills that you would have um, developed or grown with, or whatever the case may be. So I think like as you were speaking, you were talking to the aspect of like you used a particular word. I think it was awareness, that she didn't have the awareness, or she wasn't didn't have the ability to lean in and to see Keisha in her vulnerable state, reaching out to her. And I think it's the aspect of like, Shelly didn't have those skills. Shelly didn't have that skill to lean in that moment. I think
Hmm.
how she responded was uncomfortable, but I think it was justified in the terms of like, this is something shocking to me. I'm responding from a place of shock. I'm responding from a place of no, not vulnerability, but just like, this is also blowing up my world. Like, it blew up Keisha's world first, but this is
Right.
also now blowing up my world. And I think while Keisha was maintaining that narrative and that story to protect the image and that safety that's been developed, I think in some part Shelley had to confront the story and narrative that she was telling herself, that like, I'm doing this for Keisha, I'm doing this for us, we're gonna make it, we're doing all of that, only to find out in that moment that both of them are confronting their narratives, or being forced, so to say, to confront their
Right.
narratives and confront the stories that they've been telling themselves, that's formed this aspect of normalcy and safety for themselves in that moment. Um, but yeah, I think for like our lived experience, because of our lived experiences, we always assume, or maybe the older we get in age and our chronological age, we assume there's this assumption that you have these skills to handle certain things, and sometimes that just isn't the case. So like, Shelly responding the way she responded, I think, yeah, us who do the work, or us who are aware, or
Right.
us who have the skills can see like, yeah, why, like, how could you respond to your daughter? How come you can't see this? How come you can't see her vulnerability? How come you can't see that she's been holding on to this for such a long time and having to navigate this on her own? How come you can't see that? Well, I don't think Shelly had those skills. I don't think she had those skills to be self-aware, to offer empathy, or to
Hmm.
show up for Keisha emotionally. Because I think in context, I don't even think it was the aspect like she walked out. I think like she legitimately had to go to work. She,
No, I think she left early. Like, I don't think Keisha dropped it on her as she was getting ready to leave to go to work. I
okay,
think, like, obviously it was nighttime, but I
yeah,
think she could have stayed longer to have the conversation with her before leaving to go to work.
right.
Right? So I don't think it was like 30 minutes before she has to go to work and she's dropping this on her. I don't think, well, that's not what I gathered from from it, but perhaps maybe that that is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I also feel like, yes, 100% I agree with you that Shelly perhaps didn't have the skills. But I think it's interesting because we see that Keisha did have the skills. Because Keisha maintaining this whole narrative is her having the awareness to protect her mom and to protect what her mom perceives of her and making sure that she doesn't add anything extra to her mom's plate.
Mm.
So I think that's an interesting dynamic that like her 17-year-old was able to figure out these skills on how to be aware enough to create a narrative. So like even her going to prom with Justin, her talking to Justin, her pretending that they're in this still in this relationship, like that is her being aware enough to maintain a facade because
Mm-hmm.
she is acknowledging that me doing this protects my mom and doesn't add to her plate. So I'm going to continue doing this in regardless of how it makes me feel. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
do this for my mom and to maintain this image for her sake, right? And I think that also speaks to just culturally, we do a lot of things to maintain an image,
Yeah.
right? We allow abuse. We overlook things that probably shouldn't have been said, like all for an image. And I think
Yeah.
it is unfortunate that the mental gymnastics that we do to uphold an image, that isn't serving us really, and in a lot of cases it's causing harm, right? So like in Keisha's case, like I can't, like I just feel like as an adult and a parent watching it, I very much watched the show as a parent, and I
Mm.
just feel like at 17 the mental gymnastics that this girl is doing to maintain, like the fact that she was getting up like at 4:30 to go train with her grandfather
Mm-hmm.
every day. She's going to school, like coming home, getting dressed to go to school, having to like deal with her classmates, having to pretend like all of these things. It's just like and the fact that she was left alone so much, unsupervised, alone a lot of the time to just deal with her own thoughts, her own feelings, by herself. It's like she has a lot going on for someone who's 17.
Mm-hmm.
um so yeah, I just thought it was interesting. Just I think it is interesting how much as people you're falling asleep in my podcast.
I'm not. I'm listening to you. You know, but
Nigel, your eyes them are drooping down.
no, I'm up. I'm fine. We're recording. Why would you say that?
Because okay, how much we as people of color, as Black people, have feel the need to maintain an image, to uphold like this facade sometimes so that we look like something that we actually aren't.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is always going to be the narrative. I think that's always just going to be the thing, and it's just the aspect of like that's something we'll experience no matter how old we get or how old.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, no matter how old we are, I think there's always going to be that experience of always having to like maintain something that no longer serves us or maintain something that is costing us in another area of life.
Right.
So I think, as you said, like Keisha having to maintain this story, essentially, there was so much mental work going into that. There was so much things emotionally going into that, physically going into that. Because I think at the same time, while she was maintaining um, the story and doing all those mental gymnastics emotionally and whatnot, there was still the goal that she had in terms of like she
Mm-hmm.
going to Harvard, right? Yeah, going to Harvard.
No,
Howard,
Howard.
sorry, Howard. Um, in that aspect of like going to Howard and wanting to be there and understanding the impact that would have for her and just the
Yeah, that was
opportunities
her
that
ticket
would,
out. That was
yeah,
her
or
ticket out.
yeah,
Yeah.
just the opportunity. So I think like it's that is also a factor at play as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Since we're talking about like like their post-secondary pursuit. We can jump into the scene where Dawn, like where Justin pretty much fades into the background. And I think, like I mentioned, I feel like that's like a trend throughout the show. And I think it's just so I think it's interesting that like two things I think is interesting. I think the relationship for Americans when it comes to post-secondary institutions is quite interesting as a Canadian watching because we don't have that type of like an alliance with institutions in the way that they do. So I think part of Dawn's like thing was one, she wanted him to go to Western because she went to Western and she wanted to create this legacy thing. I don't know that to be a trend here in Canada. Like people don't say
Mm,
I went to Ryerson, so my kids going to Ryerson. Like I have not experienced that.
mm-hmm.
So I thought that like I think that's interesting. So I think that was part of her like her thing that he needed to go to Northwestern because she did and she wanted to create this like legacy, but also her her like I think there's a part in the the series where she basically says to him like you as a black man you need to be exceptional,
Right.
and her thinking that you going to a PWI school is what's gonna help you to be exceptional. So like her almost thinking that going to an HBCU wouldn't cut it. Like you
Mm-hmm.
need to go the extra mile in order to be in spaces where doors can open for you and to be exceptional. She almost even positioned their dad like him having like the restaurant and the business almost like a fluke. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is
Mm-hmm.
not something to follow. This is an exception. This isn't the rule. Like the
Mm-hmm.
only reason why your dad is where he is because like of the connection that I was able to make by
Right.
going to PWI, right? And so I thought that was interesting that she aligned herself so much with whiteness. And I think that's something that we do a lot. Like people of color do that
Mm-hmm.
across all people of color. We like aligning yourself with whiteness and seeing that whiteness as the meal ticket and seeing that as like how I'm gonna get to the success that I need. And I think Justin being with Keisha really opened his eyes to another way.
Mm-hmm.
And because she went to that St. Mary's school, which was like more predominantly black students, he felt something different.
Yeah, I think yeah, that's a bit not tough, but I think it's more uncomfortable to sit with just because of that aspect or the perspective of like education. So I think like even like Don's desire for him to go there, while it was like that, PWI aspect, I think it was also the aspect of like education on a whole. Like you need to have something, or you need to be good at something educationally wise in order for you to make it in this work. 'Cause I think it was I don't remember the exact scene, but I think it was, yeah, I think it was that scene where um, she's at the table. Justin either comes in from Keisha, seeing Keisha, or something along those lines. But it was along the scene was more so painting the picture of like, no, this is the plan, and we need to stick to the plan. And I think it's in that same scene where she's talking to him about the aspect that without, I think, basketball, and I think she said ED, can't remember. But she was just saying like he wasn't a strong candidate without certain things, and I think it was just the aspect of this like we are taught and told like how necessary a piece of paper is from a
Yeah.
degree with a degree from an institution, how much doors that's going to open. We're sold this idea that we need this
Yeah.
education, we need this paper, and there are a lot of successful individuals in the world that like have not gone to post-secondary and those kind of things. And this is not us promoting, not to go to post-secondary or
Yeah.
where the case would be. Like
Academia
you,
is important.
yeah, getting your, yeah, academia is important because I think it's the aspect of like there's just a different set of skills that you learn in post-secondary outside of the actual um, academic, you know,
Yeah.
stuff
And
that
like,
you're learning, so to say.
and for being
Um,
honest, our world
mhm,
is set up to prioritize academia. Like,
right.
it's just what it is. Like, this is the world. This is what capitalism is. This is what the systems have been made to do. So, like, it
Yeah.
is what it is. And you just have to fall in line,
Yeah.
like,
Uh,
essentially.
yeah. But I think even with Don in that aspect, I think again, looking at the show from like the perspective of a parent, I could see her heart. So I think for me,
Yeah,
like
of
watching
course.
the show, um, and I was like, on threads the whole time, kind of just like sharing thoughts and whatnot.
Yeah,
And I was seeing a lot of people just having these mixed bag of emotions with Dawn,
Dawn.
and
Yeah,
I could understand and see, but I also, for me, I think it was just like Dawn was refreshing. She was refreshing to see, and I think I even put on threads and was like, Dawn is a parent. Like she's
yeah.
involved. She's like you're not pulling fast ones. Like she's doing all the
She's
things
in
that like
tune
yeah,
with
she's in
her
tune, and I
kid
think, and I think for me,
ish.
and I think for me, I can relate because I think like my parents were like that, like they were involved, they were in tune. Like I'm going to a friend's house, yeah, I need your friend's parents'
Yeah.
number, or I need to know where they stay at, whatever the case may be. So it's like, I think that was just very refreshing, to see, but also just the aspect of like yes, she wants to be this parent, or she is this parent to her kids, and yes, she wants to do right by them, but she's also having her own stuff to navigate through it, which I'm really excited that they've renewed it for season two because I
Hmm.
really hope
I
that
really,
they
yeah,
kind of flesh out Dawn's
the
journey in terms of
parents.
like yeah in terms of just where they're coming from, and I think even the aspect of like education and the relationship between Don and Justin. I think you even saw it maybe episode 7 or 8. I think it was episode 7 or 8. Can't remember. Whatever. But just how like Eric responded. When he
Yeah.
decides to go to like Northwestern and just like what it meant for him in terms of his family and his and
Yes.
the
At
legacy.
Christmas.
Yeah,
I think
and
it's
so
episode 7. Yeah.
yeah, so I think like that even speaks to that pressure, that complex pressure of like, yeah, I have to go to post secondary or just like what this paper, means to not just me, but like my family. Like this paper means so much more than what's
Yeah.
actually written on this
But
paper.
I also think, I think it has a lot less to do with the institute, like him going to university, and more to do with the fact that Justin didn't know who Justin was. He didn't have, like, in contrast to Keisha, Keisha was very clear. She was like, this is my plan. This is the plan. This is what I'm working towards. And whether or not, like, I guess we can gather that's what made her happy. That's what made her heart sing. She felt attuned to that plan.
Mhm.
And she was going to go and get that. Justin, he just wasn't sure. Like, he was playing basketball, but did he actually love basketball?
Right.
We don't know.
Or or maybe it's this aspect. I'm sorry to cut you. Maybe it's this aspect of, and I just had this thought of maybe it's their privilege. Maybe there was a privilege aspect that like Justin being a black
Absolutely.
male has this privilege of like I have time. I don't have to have it all together,
Oh,
so to say. Whereas Keisha, being that black female, kind of has to have it all together from young. And I think there was that line
yeah.
after they did the track training, the track session, when
Yes.
Christian came around and she was talking to the coach, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm running a different race, something
Race.
along on the lines,
Yeah.
or
When he
my
was trying to discourage her from going to Howard, and she's
yeah,
like,
no,
nah.
this is my race, or I'm running a different race." And I think
Right.
that just spoke so well in terms of like there is absolutely a different race that black women are running in compared to their white counterparts, or even to compared to other black males, that like black females aren't afforded the time to
To play around.
to play around, to figure themselves out in comparison to black in
Mm,
comparison to black males. And I think
yeah.
that kind of you could see that in the show, that and maybe that's where that I don't remember the exact terminology, but just that, just the aspect of like Dawn being a black woman and having to figure it out, and Eric kind of stumbled into what he's doing now in terms of his career as a chef and everything. Their career paths,
Right.
or maybe how they grew up, were just drastically different. So
That's
now
good
Dawn is kind of like portraying that onto
to
Justin, be like,
just
hey,
and like
you
you need to
gotta
figure it out. Yeah, you got to get it
you need to
together.
figure out, you need
Yeah.
to know what you're doing. And I think again, that's just the aspect of like Dawn that I kind of appreciated, that she was she was trying, like she really wanted her son to be successful, she really
Or I
wanted
think
the
she
best for her
held him
son.
accountable
Yeah, I think
a
maybe that's
lot.
what
And
it is.
I
I think,
yeah.
yeah.
And I think where I thought you were going with that point was this there's a part where she basically says to him like you only get a certain amount of time to play around and to make mistakes and fail because we're your safety net. But there's gonna
Right,
become a point in time where like you can't do that anymore. So
right.
that's what I thought. That's what I thought you were going with that, and I think that's a luxury and a privilege that Justin has in his parents that not all kids have, and Keisha definitely didn't have, right? And I think like even when she said that, I felt like, yeah, like that is a privilege that I want to give our son. Like I want him to be able to have the space to be able to figure things out and know that we are his safety net. I think what may have been unfortunate for Justin is that he's been living this plan and not asking questions about the plan, and now and I guess where he the school that he goes to, all of these kids are living on a plan. They're
Mhm,
following a plan scripted by somebody else potentially, and now that he has been introduced to somebody else
mhm,
who came up with her own plan, or is like thinking about the plan differently, or is challenging him to think about his plan differently, he's just like, oh wait, this isn't aligned. Like this doesn't feel right. And I think that's
mhm,
unfortunate that all this time he was unsure of himself.
mhm,
But I do appreciate though, although Dawn was upset,
mhm,
and really like wasn't able to confront because she also did walk out on Justin too when he
mhm,
confronted her. And then Eric had to like it's interesting that Eric was the one, I wouldn't call it repair, but he was the one who I guess, held space, even though he was also upset and like left the
mhm,
conversation. But I think I do love that they did allow him to have a gap year. I think that's
mhm,
also part of it, like the privilege of the fact that like you can do this. He definitely there was definitely accountability. He had to go to work.
mhm,
Um, and he was afforded the opportunity to explore what
mhm,
music would be like for him.
mhm,
And I love that. I love that so much. And I have this conversation all the time. I think it is an injustice for us to ask 18-year-olds to know what they want to do with the rest of their life. Like that is wild to me. And I think it's
mhm,
unfair. Because now like even myself approaching 35
mhm,
and considering a different career. So many of us gone to school for something and we consider a different like career path. It's not that the skills that we learned aren't useful, the information
mhm,
wasn't useful. It's just one thing that we thought we wanted in one season of our lives ends up being different once we enter the workforce and like settle a little bit into our identity and our adulthood. So yeah, I thought that was beautiful and I definitely would love to be able to be in a position to offer that to our son
yeah,
too.
yeah. I
Yeah.
agree.
Okay, so the next point, a little disclaimer mid episode. If you have little ears around, you might want to either mute or put in some headphones because We're gonna talk about the sex scenes that occurred in in this series. Some of them were a little bit cringe. Some of them made me want to clench my pearls. But I did see that people were a little bit upset about the sex scenes. People thought were inappropriate. That people thought that for teenagers that this there shouldn't be as much nudity as there was. People had a lot of thoughts. What were your thoughts on the sex scenes, Nigel?
Yeah, I mean, the sex scenes were the sex scenes. I think for me, okay, I think the sex scenes or sex in shows for me, like it's just like maybe it's bad to say, but like it's just the norm now. Like
Yeah.
there's always gonna be some sort of
So
like
yeah.
sex scene in it or some show with it. But I think the sex scenes that took place, I think there's a normal aspect to it, and that sounds bad to say, but I say it in the context of like, yeah, teens are experimenting at like you're experimenting at that age, and
Yeah.
you
They're
are
17, 18.
yeah, you're figuring yourself out, you're figuring out your body, you're figuring out there's a lot of different things that even leads you to starting or wanting to
Yeah.
experiment. I definitely would say um, they were kind of moving like grown people in these sex scenes.
Really?
A little bit. I think
Which
the
scene?
stage and the scene of them would be something you would see in another show, a more adult type show, if that makes
Okay.
sense. So, yeah, so I think it was just that aspect. But yeah, like I wasn't caught off guard. I wasn't cringing or anything like that. Like, yeah, like to
Babes,
me,
you didn't cringe when Justin was giving Keisha head in the Jeep? That didn't make you cringe? Or like at least gasp?
no,
Nah, that made me gasp. And part of the reason why it made me, I wasn't expecting it. And part of the reason
sure,
why I was like, because I remember when I was in high school, any type of fellatio was a big no no. Like,
okay,
bad man don't give head. Like,
right, of
if
course,
you're a
but like,
girl and you were caught giving head, it's like you're a whore. It was like a big
right,
thing. So
right,
to see that, I was like, oh, like there's like I feel like when you became an adult is when you start to explore that like these are just
right,
other ways of pleasuring your
right,
person, and
right,
so it's not like it's not tabooed, it's not looked down upon. But in high school, absolutely, like no, there it was a big no no. You don't do
yeah,
those things.
that
So
is
I was
factual,
like,
yeah,
what? But I think they did a very good job of like insinuating things. Like there were a
okay,
lot of scenes that were in so like that sex scene, we didn't actually see his head in her like her
no,
vagina. It
yeah,
was insinuated that that's what they were doing,
right.
right? So a lot of things were insinuated. I found I didn't have an issue with the sex scenes. I thought, if anything, I actually appreciate that they didn't romanticize like the first time or
Mm-hmm.
sex in general. Like a lot like the
Mm-hmm.
sex I think there was like two sex scenes. I
Yeah.
think it like to me it looked like what teenagers who are having sex for the first time what it looks like. It was
Okay.
awkward.
Yeah.
It wasn't long.
Right.
Um it was just like, okay, we're gonna do this. And they did it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, okay, we're done. Like it wasn't romanticized. And I appreciated that about the
Mm-hmm.
show because I think at least for me, like shows that I would have watched when I was a teenager, like created this idea in your mind that this is what your first time is gonna be like. And then when it wasn't, you're just like, okay, something
Yeah.
wrong with me? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? So I did appreciate that. Um, I yeah, like there was just not I don't know. I also appreciated that Keisha was not hypersexualized throughout the whole series
Right.
at
Yeah.
all. And like even though she wore crop tops, she wore shorts. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there was no talk about covering up, or
Yeah.
there was no, like, there was nothing that positioned her as a fast girl,
Mm-hmm.
um, as someone who was trying to trap
Right.
Justin.
Yeah.
Like, there was nothing like that. And I appreciate that she was just a teenager
Mm-hmm.
who lived in LA and it's hot, and she was wearing clothes that were appropriate for the climate. And she wasn't overtly sexualized for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And even her experience, because I don't know if you like, I gathered that like she had a little, like she felt a little bit more experience than Justin in
Yeah.
terms of sexuality and like how you move and like in an intimate way with
Right.
like a boy.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like even though she hadn't had sex either, it felt like she just kind of knew what to do with her body in
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
way that Justin didn't. I don't know. Did you gather that?
Yeah, I think she was definitely. I don't want to say definitely, but like, yeah, she did have experience, and I think that definitely showed up in that first sex scene and how they both interacted with
Hmm.
each other, and it was just that flipping of the coin in terms of like her being the female having that experience, kind of taking the lead a little bit
Yeah.
in that aspect, and Justin not having that experience,
Hmm.
and it basically being his first time, I believe. Like, yeah,
It was. Yeah,
she
it was.
yeah she taking the lead with that, and just having to manage that whole situation, because I think one of the things that happened that I noticed after the sex scene and whatnot, it was just that aspect of her needing to what's the word, to protect him, because of just how that first experience went. So her
Yeah.
having to protect him after, and just validate him in that moment of, I guess, displeasure, that
Yeah.
she
She definitely. It seemed that she was
yeah,
disappointed with the
yeah, like she was
experience.
disappointed, didn't get what she was looking for, whatever the case may be. But definitely just having to like navigate that, and just having to protect him, protect his emotions and his feelings, where oftentimes if the table is turned, black
Yeah.
females aren't they aren't getting that. They aren't receiving
They're not even getting
receiving that.
the reassurance.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I agree
Yes.
with you. And I think as I watched that, um, I like often thought about, okay, like what are we gonna do with our son when he gets to that age? And if we had a daughter, what would we do? Because I do think it is necessary for young girls. I do think it's necessary for young girls to like have an awareness of their sexuality and an onus of it. But I think what makes it not difficult, but like an added layer is the fact that like we have Christian values, and we uphold a particular standard when it comes to sex and sexuality, and not promoting sex before marriage, and just like maintaining like pure and
Yeah.
not having sex before you get married, right? So it's just like, okay, how do you then how do you help your child um, not demonize sex? Because I think in the attempt to make sure that kids are not having sex, we've demonized sex, and then we have like all these Christian women who get married and don't know what to do with their body, and like feel like they just need to lay there and like don't have any onus of their sexuality. Like they're not supposed to feel like desire, right? So then you
Right.
have that problem, and then you have the problem of like the boys who are just going crazy and not being pure or chaste or not honoring what intimacy in a relationship actually looks like. Um, so like I was like, I don't know what would we do with our like our son in terms like I would hope that we would teach him. Like, would you teach Noah how to put on a condom?
Well, yeah, I think this is something like I even put on threads as I was like reflecting. I was like, yeah, as much as I am a Christian, I have to in me being a Christian, cool, yeah, but there are just certain things that I have to, or we have to be the ones to um, teach our son. And I think, like, yeah, putting on a condom is something that he would learn from home. You're not going to learn that from your friends. You're not going to learn
Yeah,
that at school. If you're going to learn anything regarding sex and sexuality, the hope and the aim is that you're learning that from your parents. And in us teaching, that doesn't mean that we are promoting, but I think it's just understanding the reality of the world that we live in, that as much as we prepare, as much as we instruct, as much as we teach, we're teaching and instructing from the hope, or from the position of hope, that when you're faced with these decisions or in these situations, this
yeah,
is a decision that you will make. But if for whatever reason you decide not to make that decision, or I guess what we quote unquote may say the right decision, if you decide to make a different decision, you must be prepared for that decision as well. So as much as we're going to educate and promote and give guidance in terms of, not having sex before marriage, if you decide to, for whatever
mhm,
reason, have sex before marriage, you're gonna know how to strap it up, buddy. You're gonna know
yeah,
how to put on a
yeah,
condom if you
yeah.
ever decide to do that, right? Because I think it's just that understanding of, this is the world that we live in. This is the reality of the world that we're in, and the environments that we're in. Like, we're not
But
gonna
not
be
even
with
just
you.
the world that we live in. You are a human, boy or girl, you are a human being. You were designed with sexual desires,
Yeah,
period.
absolutely. Yeah,
And so as a
yeah.
teenager, like because you are developing, you are coming to an awareness of these sexual desires that you now have.
Right.
And I think as a human, you're curious. And so now you want to explore these feelings that you have and like wanting to deepen connections with people through
Hmm.
like having sex. And I think I don't think yes, culture has amplified things, but I don't think the human desire for pleasure in that way is not cultural. It's not
Hmm.
That's not cultural. That is a human need, a human desire. God created us with those things, right? And I think it's just a matter of us figuring out how to manage, how to teach, and how to set up our kids to be in, I guess, a great headspace
Hmm.
cognitively to be able
Hmm.
to understand the action that they're doing and the consequences of those actions, whether good or bad, right? And I think for me, like when you talk about sex and sexuality, I need to be the one to have, we need to be the one to have that conversation. No one's gonna have the conversation with my kid before me, um, because I think it's
Hmm.
inappropriate. But like, we need to be the ones to demystify a lot of things. And I think even statistically, kids engage in things that seem mystical, seem
Hmm.
like forbidden. If we're having the conversations, if you're learning about it, there really is no need to engage because you understand. And I think even the fact that we have a boy child, for me, I think it's equally important for him to understand woman health and
Yeah.
woman like reproductive. Like if you're gonna be having and engaging in sex with a female, you need to understand. Like
Hmm.
demystifying or like sheltering boys from understanding what periods are and like like I think it's ridiculous.
Hmm.
Because you are engaging and you're in a relationship with this person, so you need to know what is going on with their
Hmm.
body. Um, yeah, so I think like that is important. And I do honor the fact that Eric did show him how to use how to put on a condom. They did have conversations, but also Dawn had to check him about, it wasn't necessarily sex, but it was how you show up in a relationship. She had to
Hmm.
check him about you doing your part.
Hmm.
So like, yeah, Keisha's here all the time, but you need to do your part to show that you're interested too.
Right.
And I did appreciate her doing that and holding him accountable to his part that he plays in that relationship. Was there anything else?
Yeah. No. I also too did like that scene of Don holding Justin accountable to how he shows up in the relationship with Keisha. I think it was very um, necessary, and again, just different. Like, we don't necessarily see that too much
You're right.
in terms of like mothers, holding their sons accountable in the relationships that we are at. But I think it was just also the aspect of this, like, again, Dawn as a parent and just her being able to clock
Hmm.
and see how Keisha is showing up for Justin, and how easy these things can become more patterns and rhythms in relationships. So like how Keisha showed up, or was continuously showing up for Justin in the relationship without any conversation, that was easily could have just turned into a pattern and a rhythm for
Right.
the
Right.
relationship. Like that this is just what Keisha does for the in the name of the relationship, or for the sake of the relationship. And I think it was just that was important, that she was able to just clock that, and have that conversation with Justin and just let him know, like, yeah, no, you're in a relationship that
Yeah,
requires you to show up in this way. Yeah.
yeah. No, I agree with you. And I think there were so many wonderful things about this series. So many takeaways, and I think even having this conversation with you, just taking away from it, um, I like what you said about Shelly and her not having the tools and her not having the skills to show up for Keisha. It may be even the way that she may have wanted to, or in a way that would have, um, yeah, let Keisha know that she cared, right? And I
Mhm.
think that was a key part to her role and the character that she played in the show, is that like she genuinely wanted the best, but was not always able to access the best
Mhm.
for Keisha. Again, like the conversation about identity and sex and sexuality,
Mhm.
um, were just things that I think needed to be talked about. And I would be really curious to see what the young adults are saying about the show, because if you notice, like
Mhm.
on threads and on Instagram, a lot of people were having conversation about the show are adults.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I'd be very interested to see what the kids are saying about the show and how they are feeling about it.
Mhm.
Yeah, any last words?
Yeah, I think Forever is a great show. I think it was something that really will open up anyone's eyes to just their own lived experience, and just give them opportunity to reflect on things that they may have done well or didn't do well, or things that they didn't have the opportunity to experience. So I think it was very relatable in terms of like there are Keishas in the world in terms of like single
Yeah,
parent household, whether you're female or male, and just having to navigate all those pressures. But there are also Justins in the world that come from, I guess we can deem it as stable nuclear family home, where two parent are present, and just the aspect that your lived experience is valid no matter um, the the
what
background.
dynamic you
Yeah,
come from, yeah.
the dynamic that you are coming from, like the lived experience is valid. So yeah, Forever was a great show. I'm definitely excited for season two whenever they decide to work on that and
Yeah.
um, drop that series. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, you know where to find us always on Instagram, on Threads, on YouTube, on Spotify. And please share this episode with a friend, and we can continue this conversation on Instagram. Let us know your thoughts. Have you seen the series? What were your thoughts about this series? Let's keep this conversation going. Say your line.
I'm drawing a blank. I hope this
Don't you
helps.
say
Love
love
you.
you, please?
Peace. Bye.
Say it again.
I hope this helps. Love you. Peace.
Oh dear.